can be tough. If you Google them and it doesn't show up, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Because some are in papers that aren't published, or even in Portland, you have to go into the Brown Library. They have a catalog of people who died in Portland, and it's in the Portland paper, so you have to dig it up. And so I knew that several of my ancestors died in Portland. I knew where they were buried. A lot of them are buried in Calvary Cemetery in South Portland, and you can Google that, and there's a button that says Genealogy, and it will bring you to where you can put in the name, and they've put a lot of that online, and it will show you the area of the cemetery it's in, so you can actually go find it, where they lived when they died, some of them, so you can actually check some of that information, so you can get often their death date, which then you can take to the Portland room, if this is all Portland, and find an obituary, if they had one. Everybody doesn't have one. So these are things more, I've got Google and Facebook up there, Facebook twice. I Google all the time just to see what pops up and then try to follow those leads. Facebook is more when I was trying to find relatives. And so when I was looking for the relatives, so there's on the family tree, we know who everybody is on the family tree, but there's a book next to it of all the descendants of Patrick. It's not full, I haven't found everybody, but of our ancestor Patrick and his wife Mary. And so I know who some of their parents are, and some of them are on Facebook, and you feel like a voyeur. You can actually find them, and some people will post, here's so-and-so's first birthday. You're like, aha, I know their birthday. I know they have a child that's 2 years old, right? So I found one family that, they're obviously my relatives. I want to know them. They live in Colorado, and they're always doing really cool stuff. They're mountain climbing, and it sounds like they have a great life. I'm like, I gotta go visit them. But you can find a lot there. And these people might be people who have stories of their side of the family again. So you can go forever. Wills, deeds, city directories. So deeds. When I was looking for the family members, even on the island. We were looking for, so I knew through some of my searching that, what was their last name? But anyways, I came across the last name of a cousin. And when I looked in the deeds, come to find out, they had a house at one time on Long Island over across from Lorinda's. And they also lived a block away from me uptown. And I was able to find a phone number just by doing people search or one of those search engines. So I called them up. Just like, hello, this is a really strange phone call from your cousin. I was like, did you live on Long Island? And he said, yes. And I said, did you know you were part of the Murphy family? And he said, yes. And he said, and I knew that Jerry Valls was my cousin, and she used to sing on the porch, and he remembered the Burroughs, and he was talking about it. So I thought that was pretty interesting to find them. The Maine Memory Network, if you have people in New England, you may or may not find something. Descendant books. So when you're going further back, people have written books about descendants of people. And you can find them, it'll bring you to a book, and then you can follow things back really easily when other people have done it. Again, you have to be careful because somebody else wrote that. So that is not good enough for DAR. It's good enough for me to get a lead, but it's not going to be documented. You have to. So if you really want to do like Mayflower Society or DAR, especially Mayflower, it's going to take you a long time because you have to really document that. Ship logs, Ellis Island. I have found some people in the family in another line that came through Ellis Island. Some of them you can find the ship logs, some you can't. Local libraries, yearbooks. Like I go to the Portland room for obviously the Portland stuff.
What about coming in through Boston? Like my great-grandmother came into Ireland, into Boston.
Yeah, I haven't been to the Boston Library, but I have to go there. I've seen it on that show, Who Do You Think You Are? They go to Boston quite a bit. I have to go to Boston. People come into that. Yeah, we traced, Patrick will show you about up through Canada, and I worked in Montreal for a year before I started doing this. And I went up there, and come to find out all the records are in Montreal. I'm like, are you kidding me? I spent a year up here and didn't go to the library.
Can I just add something, Cheryl? I want to make a comment about find a grave at the top. If you're not
Oh,
familiar
yeah.
with that, people have gone through various cemeteries and recorded all the names in the cemetery.
Yeah.
And sometimes there are pictures of the graves, sometimes there aren't, but that's a good
really
a good
good.
resource to use. Also, city directories, when I was doing my own research, I found a lot about what my ancestors, what kind of work they were. They used to say not only their address, but they were a carpenter or a shipwright or an engineer or whatever. So that can give you a little bit more fleshing out of what your ancestors were like. And the Portland Room is a great place. It's a little tedious to go through it year by year, but you know, it's got lots of good information.
I wish they'd digitize that paper though. Spent hours up there. Oh, Karen, you sent me this, so, there's, so the Maine Genealogy Society, you said, is having their convention in Portland, but you said it's about DNA, so I'm into DNA.
Yes.
Wait for that. And then this just lists some of the interesting websites, so they might have more information there. I haven't actually gone there yet. Could you go back to that? Oh, sorry. And I can leave these slides somewhere.
Okay,
Does
yeah,
it? Yeah.
so we must have set up them.
So this was, I think, in an ad for Find Your Past. That's where I got the title of Find Your Past, but I haven't used it. But, you know, this was saying when you talk to relatives or family members, they may seem like obvious questions, but sometimes you forget to write it down, I'll tell you that. But, you know, where and when were they born? Where were they buried? Because you can find a cemetery. Where did they live? Any stories they have? Do they have children? Do they know their names? Military? You know, I found that I'd be digging things up. So I'd ask my mother, you know, tell me about this one or that one. I can't remember. I would dig things up. When I dug up the story about one of our relatives, Dorothy Keck, who's got her picture on the wall of the Historical Society. I said, do you know anything about the name Keck? Oh yes, yeah, that's my cousin, and then you get the story. You know, so you might have to go back and forth with family members and trigger their memories. I came to another part where I dug up a name and it looked like they lived in Connecticut. You know, so do you have relatives in Connecticut? Oh yeah, they moved to Connecticut. You know, so while I still have my mother and aunts, I can validate the things that I find out. You know, where they are. Okay, some hints. As you go back in time, names can change. And that's why when you look in the databases, you can click a button if you want to narrow your search down that says exact, and it will really narrow it down, but you may miss some of the spellings. And I also, when you go further back, everybody didn't read and write, and so their names have been spelled differently in different places. So you'll see a name, it's probably the same person if you get the name, but it's spelled different ways. The dates may be off by a few days. They might have recorded the baptism and not the birth, or even they could be off more than a little bit, so sometimes you need to validate it with a couple documents. That's why it's confirmed with multiple sources if you can. Sometimes you can only find one thing. Names of places change over time. Maine was Massachusetts. You know, so when you know they lived in Maine and you get further back, you have to put in Massachusetts. You're not going to find them. And towns change. But, and somebody pointed out to me recently that they had chased a lead and they thought that they had this relative who was listed with one of their other relatives in the Ellis Island records. And they chased it all the way back, and then they found out it wasn't actually their relative, that it was a sponsor of their relative, and they had been chasing the wrong lead. I don't know how they found that out. They told me you have to be careful, you know, make sure it's not a sponsor.
We bumped into this in my family. We had an uncle who decided he didn't like the way the family's name was spelled. He just changed it for himself and his descendants.
Yeah, that happens. And my future daughter-in-law, who helped us with the video, her name is Donna Who, D-O-N-A, what, H-O-O. That's a weird name, right? Wouldn't it be Donna Hugh? And she said when they immigrated, they wrote it down wrong and they just decided to keep it. So when you get further back, she's Donahue with H-U. you eat. But okay, so if you're gonna do this right, and I don't claim to do it right, but I should tell you how to do it right, there are charts and things you can keep your records in. You can get copies of these online and download them or whatever. You know, you start with your parents, you know, where they're born, whatever you know, where they're born, the place, when they died, and just go far back as you can. And then if you're interested in family groups, and this is important too, because you might be trying to follow somebody like, okay, you know, my father is Joe or whatever, and his father is Sam, and you can't find Sam's father. Well, do you have aunts and uncles, right? Because sometimes you can find records about them that bring you to that ancestor. So you have to think beyond just your own lineage to try to find more stuff. Okay, so here's where I started. This is what I knew. Where did I come from? We knew that our great-grandfather was this guy called, so we had quite a bit of information, unlike probably some people, but we knew that this guy E.W., or Edward William Murphy, was a druggist. He was a druggist in Portland, Maine. And there's still the buildings there when he had the drugstore, which was in the late 1800s. He was a pharmacist and a politician, and that he came from Canada as a 4-year-old boy. So that was what we knew from family members. So I went to the Portland room and started looking things up. There's some stuff on the Maine Memory Network because his buildings are now historical in Portland, and so it gave some family members and some dates. He has a legislative bio because he served as a representative to the Senate in the early 1900s. So that, I have a copy of it here, was my most useful information reading that because he wrote his own bio about what he did.